What's up, everyone? This is Professor Rob, Coach Steph with Team Osiris Martial Arts. So, last night was UFC Fight Pass Invitational 4. Really cool event. I got to catch a good amount of it once I got home from teaching classes. Coach Steph got to catch a little more. You had the absolute tournament, right? Then you had a handful of super fights. Some being Glover Texiera versus Anthony Smith. You had Helena versus for Emily Fernandez. You had also main event Craig Jones versus Felipe Pena. A lot of cool matches. Roberto Cyborg versus Nicholas Marigali. Overall, though, pretty cool event.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's always good to watch jiu-jitsu at such a high level, but I think just when you're on a stage like that, it just really brings out the aggression and the tenacity. So it's always fun to watch.
Yeah, definitely. So I think some of the standout matches in my book, obviously some of the bigger names there, right? So you have Roberto Cyborg versus Marigali, and funny enough, Coach Steph and I were at a gi match years ago where Marigali actually beat Cyborg Abreu via loop choke, right? Okay. So I kind of thought that Marigali was going to win that match, which didn't end up happening, and he ended up catching him in an armbar in overtime, which was funny that Cyborg went with a 10-finger grip instead of the RNC grip for the spiderweb armbar. Right? I thought that was a really poor decision. Maybe he just didn't think about it in the time being, or maybe he didn't drill EBI overtime. Because if you do, the best, by far the best grip is RNC grip. 10-finger grip is easy to break.
I mean, honestly, I'm sure he's used to the EBI overtime. I just think it was.
I think he'd be surprised.
I think it was just more being tired, and not making the best decision in that moment, because he did look fatigued towards the end.
He did, but you'd be surprised. Even they were talking. Commentators were talking about it. You'd be surprised how many high-level black belts not only don't put themselves in bad positions, but I personally know high-level black belts that have done EBI overtime rule sets and don't practice it.
Right. They
literally just train and don't look at the rules. Or they don't, even if they look at the rules, they're like, oh, I know how to escape the back. Oh, I know how to escape spiderweb armbar. So you'd be surprised how many high-level black belts, male, female, gi, no gi, don't practice those EBI overtimes, and they're not used to it. And you can see the people that were used to the EBI overtimes and how good they were at, number one, locking the body triangle. Yeah. Getting the body triangle, getting that ride time, and then end up winning. A lot of times these matches do go to overtime. They do go to all the way through the 3 rounds of the EBI overtime, and if you don't get the sub, it's the fastest escape time. So if you're really good at escaping quick from the back take or the spiderweb armbar, and then you're also really good at the offensive side, putting the body triangle in and racking up that ride time, you can see again the people that have not competed in it but also practice it.
Yeah, I definitely think the body triangle was one of the keys to success with the ride time for Marigali, because just those long legs. I mean, and we even saw, Cyborg try to cross his legs, because obviously he's not going to lock up the body triangle, but he even tried to cross them at some point, and it was just not as effective.
No, not near as effective. Yeah, the other standout matches, I didn't get to see this one, but Emily Fernandez versus Helena Crevar, the teenage phenom from New Wave. She ended up strangling her at an RNC chokes. That's a big win for her. I mean, obviously she's on a tear, but that's a young black belt. So I mean, she's beating obviously adults and teens, and then black belts, at high level.
At blue belt. Yeah, because she's still a blue belt, which is crazy. But one of the things that I really liked about that match was, she was constantly attacking the legs, right from the beginning. And actually Emily did a really good job of being very aware, defending, backing away, not really letting her get a good grip at all in the beginning. So there was a lot of really good exchanges. And I remember the commentator saying they both have a very similar style. They both like to be on their back. And that's always what's so hard about these high level matches, is you can have your style, but then if you go against somebody that's better at that style, then you're forced to be on top. And I think that was what really happened is she was forced to be on top almost the entire match, and just kind of fell short. So, and it made a lot of sense for Helena to go to the upper body because, she wasn't really having as much success with the lower body submissions.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, if you're not having success where you're usually, successful at, switching it up sometimes will throw off your opponent and then give you an opening. The other some super fights, so you had Anthony Smith versus Glover Teixeira, which I thought honestly was a good match, but I thought the format was terrible. So if you didn't watch this, they're both obviously UFC fighters. Anthony Smith is still active UFC fighter. Teixeira is a recently retired former champ. Both amazing UFC fighters. But the format was 3 4-minute rounds, open scoring, with basically a minute rest in between, which it was kind of like, it was very weird because like they would get to a good position and maybe end in a good position, but their bell rang and then boom, they go back to the corner, get a little water, and then back at it, but they start standing again. So it's like you worked really hard to get past the guard, you worked hard to get mount, back take, what have you, and then they reset. So I get they were trying to like make it kind of like MMA, and maybe they agreed on this rule set, maybe UFC Fight Pass came up with this rule set, but I thought it was just like, it didn't work for jiu-jitsu. It works for MMA, right? But for jiu-jitsu, it's like, it just doesn't work for me.
I think the main thing is it takes so long to get to a good position in a jiu-jitsu match. So it almost took them the full round to get to a dominant position, and then immediately like they're stopping it and starting all over again. So that was kind of one of the negatives to that rule set. But like I really like what Glover said. He's like, this is great. I get to compete, and then I don't have to go to the hospital, and I can go have a beer after this. And that's kind of one of the things that we love so much about jiu-jitsu is like you can go hard, you can compete all day, and walk away with not a scratch on you.
Yeah, most time. Yeah, you can be pretty unscathed. But I like seeing the MMA guys go into jiu-jitsu, and I like honestly seeing the MMA guys go against MMA guys. I don't mind them going against jiu-jitsu guys, but it's kind of more of an even playing field when you have the high-level MMA guys going against the high-level MMA guys, because they haven't been focusing on jiu-jitsu for the past 10, 15, 20 years. They've been focused on MMA, right? So it's kind of a more evenly matchup. And I thought it was a good matchup. It was pretty back and forth, even though Glover got the unanimous decision. I think it was back and forth. However, just the format is just kind of weird. Like I said, maybe they'll have to go to EBI overtime, but give them a 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Give 10 minutes, 12 minutes.
Or just longer rounds.
I don't like the rounds. Again, the rounds just like, if we got a 4 and 5 minute round and then I get and like back to the body triangle. I got to the body triangle at the last minute, and then we reset and we start standing again. I'm like, this isn't realistic.
Yeah.
Like this isn't realistic. Like jiu-jitsu, it's just like, no, I was on your back, had a body triangle, and I got to stand back up because we got to do another round. For me, I don't like it as a jiu-jitsu practitioner. I think viewer friendly. It just, like I said, it doesn't work. I think just give them like 10, 12, 15 minutes, whatever it may be. If you don't like the EBI overtime, that's fine. But it just kind of threw everything off because it's like you have all these other matches that are like the same format, 10, 12 minutes, 3 EBI overtime rounds. And then you have this this MMA match that's 3, 4 minute rounds with a minute rest in between. It's just kind of weird. The other matches, again, I didn't get to see the whole tournament. But I think for me, Big Dan, and he had some pretty amazing matches. He had a knee bar finish, heel hook finish.
Yeah, one of them the one that I caught was the belly down knee bar, and that is actually something that I've been playing around with because it's just one of those submissions that you just don't see coming. And he was actually, the other guy was good, like had him in a triangle and then just extended that leg, and then it was just so quick and like so devastating that it is it's kind of one of those really sneaky but really dangerous submissions.
Yeah. I mean, he slapped that on fairly quick, that belly down knee bar, and then
it was less than a minute for sure.
Yeah, had a heel hook victory as well, and then just to get into it, and then the finals against Nicky Rod. And Nicky Rod, he had some tough matches. He had Roberto Jimenez, went to OT. I forget the other matches he had, but he had quite a few matches where they all went to OT, right? And that was obviously more taxing than Big Dan. And then so they ended up meeting in the finals, mind you. So it's kind of a underlying backstory there. You got B Team versus New Wave, which is kind of cool to see, even though they consider Big Dan a junior, right? Since he's younger, 21-year-old, but I mean 50 pounds heavier. It's huge.
Yeah.
Like Big Dan is obviously big, right? He's 50 pounds heavier, and like the commentators were saying, like Nicky Rod was used to being the bigger, stronger guy, and in this situation, he's not, right? But I think what really helped him out was his athleticism, his ability to use athleticism to his advantage, right? Not being necessarily stronger, the bigger person, but being more athletic, being very able to like move and switch directions to open up the guard passing.
Yeah, I think even more so is that it's just like him being a veteran of competing, because in that moment, he was not having a lot of success passing in the beginning, but then when he found the one thing that allowed him to pass, he did it over and over and over again. And I think just like being able to identify that and then replicate it like consistently is something that like it happens right there in the match. Like you're not in the first couple minutes, you're like filling it out, what works, what doesn't work. But then once he like found out like, oh, this pass is gonna work, he did it multiple times.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like you said, like the competition experience, like he knows that pass works. That's his body lock, right? Or his rowdy lock, I think he calls it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he used this against Felipe Pena in the last ADCC. And I mean, Felipe Pena arguably has one of the best guards in the world. Probably one of the best guards on that card last night. And him, Felipe Pena went against Craig Jones in the main event. But to pass Felipe Pena is with that guard with that same body lock. Just goes to show you how effective it is. And then obviously, I think he hit it 3 times.
Yeah.
He hit it 3 times, and he was very smart too. I think one of the second or third times he hit it, and then ended up going to mount, right? But knowing that Big Dan has such good technical leg locks, he immediately dismounted and went back to side control. And I thought it was very intelligent, because you could have lost it all there if you got to mount, got into a good leg entanglement from Big Dan from the bottom, and then again, just that little mental lapse. But I think immediately as he jumped into mount, he realized, okay, there's a leg lock position here. Let me get back to side control.
Right.
I think he was patient and knew that it was going to go into overtime, right? And then we'll talk about the overtime. The armbar escape was insane, right? Two armbar escapes from Nicky Rod that, I mean, would have broke most people's arms, right? I mean, he's very technical, and also again, the athleticism for him to escape those arm bars was incredible, right? It was kind of like, it made me think like I actually was there live when EBI versus Gordon versus Craig, right? And Gordon escaped an arm bar that was really tight from Craig, right? Really, I mean, everybody was like, oh my God, Gordon's gonna get submitted, right? And he escaped. I mean, similar also to like Kron Gracie versus Gary Tone in ADCC China, right? Not near as dynamic as that armbar escape, but kind of that esque type of, oh my God, his arm's gonna snap at any second.
Right.
And like to do that 2 times back-to-back rounds, EBI overtime rounds, what to me was amazing. And I think like like some of the commentators are saying, like after that second escape, I think that really kind of deflated Big Dan, and like it was like frustrating. Like, man, I had this guy on the ropes, like literally about to break his arm. I'm 50 pounds heavier than him. I should be able to snap him like a twig, and he was able to escape. Yeah. And then for him to come back and get that RNC choke again, I think he was kind of deflated. Obviously, fatigue could have been a factor too. But back to what we were saying earlier, like Nicky Rod, he went overtime every single match, whereas Big Dan was more the fresher guy, and obviously the much heavier, stronger athlete.
Definitely. I think like another thing is, you can always tell too when athletes do purposely put themselves in bad positions, because they don't panic, they don't freak out, they stay calm. And even though like for us as the viewers, it's like, oh wow, this is the end, and then boom, they still find a way to get out. Like that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, you can definitely tell he's puts himself in some bad spots. Obviously, one of the highest level training room there at B Team in Austin. But yeah, I mean, hats off to him. I feel like he's just improving. And then let's talk about, the call out, right? So he called out Gordon Ryan, of course. And then he also said, let's do the USADA testing, right? So Nicky Rod, known as the Natty King, so he's, done his testing before from Derek, more plates, more dates, right? Came out completely clean. However, he's, he calls out the King, Gordon Ryan, saying basically, hey, let's take USADA testing, which is very, very strict, right? Before and after the competition. And I forget the time limit, maybe it was like a 12-minute time limit, EBI overtime rounds, right? And if you remember the last UFC Fight Pass, Gordon won, but he barely won by escape time. And then also Nicky Rod was putting an RNC choke on him in that event, right? And obviously Gordon has his stomach issues and things he was going through, but I mean, it would seem like that Nicky Rod is closing that gap. And right, with Gordon having, I believe he had surgery, right, on his stomach and being out from competition, and Nicky Rod continuing to compete, you would think that he's closing that gap, and eventually, if that continues to go as it's been, like he may beat him, right? Or maybe not submit him, maybe he beats him by escape time, like an EBI overtime, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's very interesting, and I think it's a very interesting, like, okay, you claim to be you claim that he's not natty, okay, let's take tests, and like USADA is the best to do it, right? The most stringent testing protocol out there.
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting. I mean, it's one of those things, only time will tell, and once Gordon Ryan comes back to competing, like, we'll see where that gap is. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely fun to watch either way.
Yeah, I can't wait for that rematch, and I mean, hopefully Gordon gets his health in order, and that way they can, get that. I don't know how long that'll be, but like I said, I think in that time being, like, Nicky Rod's just going to keep competing, keep getting better, keep improving, obviously in the training room too. So I think whenever that time does come, I don't think that gap that was so far will be anymore, right?
The main event.
The main event, yeah. So the main event, honestly, like the tough part is like it's hard to follow like Nicky Rod versus Big Dan. Like that was such a great match, and just the overtimes, the armbar escapes were just insane, right? So you literally like spike someone's heart rate to like 200, right, and then you like back down to like just like Craig and
I didn't understand. Like they kept standing up, like they just kept standing up, and they kept doing the get down roll, and they kept standing right back up. There was an actual wrestler, Ramon Bravo Young, on the card that did more jiu-jitsu in his match than they did in their match. So I wasn't really sure like what the game plan was, or
I honestly think it looks like the game plan was just take it to overtime. I honestly like, and I mean they're both very, very high level. Like, and obviously Craig's known for his leg locks, right? He does have other great guillotines, other submission wins, but he's known as a leg locker, right? And Felipe Pena is known as a great defensive leg locker, right? And using that leg lock defense to often like take someone's back, like he did to Gordon many years ago. So I think that honestly maybe they both were game planning for overtime. But yeah, it was just boring, honestly. Like it wasn't the most exciting match because luckily the get down rule was there, because if not it would have been a wrestling match. And as far as a jiu-jitsu event goes, and a jiu-jitsu spectator and fan, you would have been really disappointed, even more so, right? And so the get down rule, if you don't know that, is after a minute they have to get down into butterfly with double underhooks, right? And usually if it's no one is like the more dominant person, they do it by coin toss, and you can pick top or bottom. But if someone's more dominant, more aggressive, they allow that person to pick the top or bottom position. But there was multiple get downs: Craig on top, Craig on bottom, Felipe on top, Felipe on bottom, and just nothing happened, right? Not a lot of real like submission attempts, guard passes, things like that. They just, like you said, like sometimes the person on top would back out. Often Felipe backed out, then Craig stood up, and it just boring. And then especially after that Nicky Rod, Big Dan, EBI overtime, it was just like, I was like, man, like we stayed up to like midnight watching this. I was like, honestly, I could have went to sleep after the Nicky Rod.
Honestly, I was falling asleep.
Yeah, but it was just one of those matches that's like, on paper, it's like, yeah, they're two super high level, competitors. I mean, Felipe's obviously bigger. He competes in a higher weight class than Craig does. However, like they're both the highest level, right? So you on paper it's like seems like a great matchup, but it just didn't deliver. And again, like, and this happens in other events that have EBI overtime rules. You have people that play just to make it to that EBI overtime, and like I said earlier, like those people, I think you have to be drilling those EBI overtimes, because if that's your goal is to like take it to the overtime, then you have to be drilling that, have that down to order to win there, right?
Yeah.
And it's an unfortunate part of the rule set, but we all know like there's no perfect rule set, right?
Yeah.
There's chinks, and there's you know, good and bad about all rule sets, IBJJF, ADCC, what have you. But I think sometimes you just get those competitors that maybe know they're not gonna, it's gonna be very difficult to submit that person, or maybe they know it's just not likely. So we're gonna kind of stall, we're gonna kind of stand up, we're gonna kind of wrestle and just take it to EBI overtime. And it was unfortunate, but you know, it is what it is. It's part of that rule set, and I think it always will be. And there's, you know, though I think the ways you incentivize guys to finish is to give like a like EBI does. If you finish within the time regulation, you get more money, right? So it's like, and that's what they were talking about last night. The commentators, they were talking about comparing it to Pride and like the yellow card, right? So if I forget, you get X amount of yellow cards in Pride, they take a percentage.
Taking your money,
yeah. So it's like, no, there's no better motivation that we know than money, right? And if you start taking somebody's money out of their pocket, that's how they're really gonna, all right, get a fire under their ass, and they're gonna start going for the sub. They're gonna start pushing, because otherwise, you know, they're just work until the EBI overtime, and then from there they're just going to, like I said, work the EBI overtime rules to get the fastest escape and win. You know, which Craig did, which, you know, he hats off to him, he did win, and but you could tell, I think at the end of the, like, they were very friendly, and I don't think either guy was very, like, you know, maybe happy about the performance, right? I know Craig, he likes to finish and he likes to submit, so I don't think either guy was like, you know, just excited, super excited about the performance. I think Craig was more excited to have two members of the B team win, especially Nicky Rod beating Big Dan. Obviously, you know that there's a huge rivalry between B team and New Wave right now, and I think this kind of pours more fuel on the fire, and it kind of keeps it going, and also you know, puts a feather in the B team's cap. So
yeah, I'm excited. You know, I think what UFC Fight Pass is doing is pretty incredible. It's you know, it's just giving more notoriety to jiu-jitsu on a high level, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it brings more jiu-jitsu to UFC fans, right? People that have UFC Fight Pass, people that follow the UFC are going to see more jiu-jitsu and get more involved. Obviously, they're aware of jiu-jitsu, but they're going to learn more about jiu-jitsu, learn these big names in jiu-jitsu, and see the high-level grappling. And then also, like I said, the MMA, back to like Glover and Anthony Smith competing, like it's gonna bring them over. Like, oh, I love that's my favorite fighter. I want to see him do jiu-jitsu, right? So it's gonna bring crossover from those MMA fans that know a little bit about jiu-jitsu but don't really know the ins and outs, and maybe the big stars, the big names. It's gonna bring them over. And then I also think, just like obviously UFC is, you know, the biggest MMA organization in the world right now, so they have the money to put behind jiu-jitsu, support it, and then also you know, build it up, right? And I think that's big, you know, like having these big companies like ADCC, UFC, that are like really pushing it to the masses, and not just like to this niche audience of people that already do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so overall, I think it's a great event. I love the tournament, love the absolute tournament. That was great. Hopefully next one we see, you know, Gordon versus Nicky Rod. If not, I'm sure there'll be other great lineups for UFC Fight Pass Invitational.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe.